the images consigned to history for all the wrong reasons, when on March 20th, 2003, the UK and US attacked Iraq. The build-up was as controversial as the war itself.
Secretary of State Powell will present information and intelligence about Iraq's illegal weapons programs, its attempts to hide those weapons from inspectors, and its links to terrorist groups.
The failure of American news media to check government distortion reached new heights when, on the eve of war, the highly respected Secretary of State Colin Powell appeared before the United Nations to make the case that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Saddam Hussein's intentions have never changed. He is not developing the missiles for self-defense. These are missiles that Iraq wants in order to project power, to threaten, and to deliver chemical, biological, and, if we let him, nuclear warheads. One of the most worrisome things that emerges from the thick intelligence file we have on Iraq's biological weapons is the existence of mobile production facilities used to make biological agents. Let me take you inside that intelligence file and share with you what we know from eyewitness accounts. We have first-hand descriptions of biological weapons factories on wheels and on rails. The trucks and train cars are easily moved and are designed to evade detection by inspectors. In a matter of months, they can produce a quantity of biological poison equal to the entire amount that Iraq claimed to have produced in the years prior to the Gulf War.
Today, Secretary of State Powell brought the United Nations Security Council the administration's best evidence so far.
After Colin Powell's speech to the UN, immediately the U.S. press applauded with great enthusiasm.
Did Colin Powell close the deal today in your mind for anyone who has yet objectively to make up their mind?
I think for anybody who analyzes the situation, he has closed the deal.
This irrefutable, undeniable, incontrovertible evidence today. Colin Powell brilliantly delivered that smoking gun today. Colin Powell's outstanding today. I mean, it was lockstep. It was so compelling. I don't see how anybody at this point cannot support this effort.
He made a wonderful presentation. I thought he made a great case for the purpose of disarmament.
It was devastating. I mean, and overwhelming abundance of the evidence. Point after point after point. He just flooded the terrain with data.
It's the end of the argument phase. America has made its case.
Then Secretary of State Colin Powell speaking at the UN February 5th, 2003. Powell also estimated Iraq had a stockpile of between 100 and 500 tons of chemical weapons agent. All of his claims about weapons of mass destruction turned out to be false.
Before taking military action, he wanted to present our case to the United Nations publicly. And so on a Thursday afternoon, I was in with him. He said, would you take the case next Tuesday?
To the UN?
Yeah.
You made the case that Saddam did have, or we thought he had, weapons of mass destruction. When it turned out he didn't,
right.
Do you think, you were embarrassed by that? Or do you think that the U.S. was embarrassed? Or do you think, had we known he didn't have weapons of mass destruction, President Bush would have gone ahead anyway?
No, he would not have gone ahead. And I asked him that specific question when we were going through this. I said, Mr. President, if Saddam Hussein can prove that he has no weapons of mass destruction, then you do not have a basis for war. Are you prepared to accept that, even if it means Saddam Hussein will stay in place? Hesitantly, he said, yes, I will accept that. So that's why I went forward. So I went out and spent 3 days at the CIA with the intelligence communities and prepared the document that I would present. And every word in there was approved by the CIA, was written by the CIA. And so we went, I gave the presentation. It seemed to go well. I was confident that it went well. But then within a few days or a couple of weeks, it started to fall apart. So yes, I was more than embarrassed. I was mortified, because even though the president had used the same information, Congress had used the same information, Secretary Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, all of us were using the same information, but I'm the one who made the biggest presentation of it. So it all sort of fell on me. That's show business.
Constantly say to people there are no decisions that have been made in relation to Iraq at all, but there is no doubt that Iraq poses a threat in respect of weapons of mass destruction, and there is no doubt that this issue is an issue that should be dealt with. There is no doubt at all The United Nations resolutions that Saddam is in breach of are there for a purpose. He is, without any question, still trying to develop that chemical, biological, potentially nuclear capability, and to allow him to do so without any let or hindrance, just to say we can carry on and do it, I think would be irresponsible. Look, I would never support anything I thought was wrong out of some blind loyalty to the US.
To allow Saddam to use the weapons he has, or to get the weapons he wants, would be an act of gross irresponsibility, and we should not and we must not countenance it.
I think most people are, that he has these weapons, and that the people and the documentation exist to show that.
And the truth is, this issue of weapons of mass destruction is a real threat to the world. I believe, incidentally, that it is only a matter of time before it is linked with international terrorism. Can we be sure that terrorism and weapons of mass destruction will join together? Let us say one thing. If we are wrong, we will have destroyed a threat that at its least is responsible for inhuman carnage and suffering. That is something I am confident history will forgive.
You know, there's always been something bizarre about the notion that Saddam never had any weapons of mass destruction. I mean, we had a 12-year history with the UN for a reason. As I've said constantly to you, I believe the intelligence we received is correct.
The intelligence community throughout, like the UN, like virtually, so far as I'm aware, most intelligence services in the world, certainly did believe that he had WMD, weapons and capability and intent.
It was right to remove Saddam. We sometimes forget now what the regime was actually like and the devastation it caused, not just within his own country, but in the region and the wider world. I took a decision I thought to be right. I would take the same decision, if I was back in the same place, with the same information, I would take the same decision. Obviously, that's the decision I believe was right.
Tony Blair gave Parliament the dossier he used to wage war on Iraq. In it, he claimed that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction that he can use within 45 minutes. From the very day it was published, it was dubbed the DODGY dossier. There were no weapons of mass destruction, but Britain waged war anyway. It seemed nothing could stop the path to war, not Robin Cook's resignation in Parliament, nor the millions who marched on the streets. Just a few weeks ago, Nobel Peace Prize winner Desmond Tutu called for Blair to be tried at The Hague for war crimes.
This will be Tony Blair's epitaph, the whole question of Iraq, and the dossier will be remembered as a time when the political establishment, people going right up to the Prime Minister, lied and deceived in order to take us into a war which was not necessary at all. Forgetting.
A decade on and the war talk has not stopped. It has only shifted.
The frightening thing is that far from the politicians drawing the lesson that they shouldn't go to war again, they talk about intervention in Syria. There was an intervention in Libya last year about regime change, which is not legal under international law. And of course, they are still talking about an attack on Iran.
The former UN Chief Weapons Inspector says the United States was high on military action in the lead up to the invasion of Iraq. Dr. Hans Blix has told the inquiry into the war that Britain and the US had relied on faulty intelligence. And he said he had warned them that they may not find any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Here's London correspondent Philip Williams.
Now 82, the former UN Chief Weapons Inspector was adamant he thought the war was illegal, and that the Americans under President Bush were keen to bring it on.
The US at the time was high on military. They felt that they could get away with it.
Against the advice of UN weapons inspectors and without the approval of the UN Security Council, the US and its allies invaded Iraq and toppled Saddam. The issue of Iraq holding WMDs was one of the main reasons for the invasion, but no such weapons were found.
This day in 2004, the man charged with finding WMDs released this report, revealing that he'd found nothing.
We did not find stocks of either chemical or biological weapons. Active nuclear weapons program, no. We found no evidence, nor do we judge that there was one.
And that we will in fact find weapons or evidence of weapons programs that are conclusive.
I don't think we'll discover anything myself.
It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north. Well, first of all, I haven't lied. There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
Talking about lies and your allegation that there was bulletproof evidence of ties between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. Was that a lie?
I don't know anybody that I can think of who has contended that the Iraqis had nuclear weapons.
And we believe he has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons.
Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb.
We cannot wait for the final proof.
He's got him. He's got him.
The smoking gun.
He's got him.
That could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Colin Powell didn't lie.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
I have not suggested there's a connection between Iraq and 9/11.
You have said in the past that it was, quote, pretty well confirmed.
No, I never said that.
Okay. I think that is...
Absolutely not. What I said was, it's been pretty well confirmed that he did go to Prague and he did meet with a senior official of the Iraqi intelligence service.
Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists or help them develop their own. What did Iraq have to do with what? The attack on the World Trade Center. Nothing.
He said there were three main reasons for going to war in Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths, spent enormous sums, taken great risks to build and keep weapons of mass destruction.
The claim that Iraq was sponsoring terrorists who would have attacked us on 9/11.
Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained.
And that Iraq had purchased nuclear materials from Niger.
The regime is seeking a nuclear bomb.
All three of those turned out to be false.
First, if I might correct a misperception, I don't think we ever said, at least I know I didn't say, that there was a direct connection between September the 11th and Saddam Hussein.
Who does the president think he's kidding?
Of course, it was information that was mistaken.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
ورا صدام شليتني اجعل السلام اجعل السلام يا الله.
Lay down. Now let's go.
You don't think there's a risk going into people's houses like that it might make them more scared of you and sort of more, anti-American?
I feel terrible about what happened to these Iraqi detainees.
I'd do it again in a minute.
feel that this huge sacrifice that you've made has been for a cause that has been worthwhile?
I can't answer that question right now.
When people look back on this time and look back on this conflict, I honestly believe they will see this as one of the defining moments of our century. And you did it. It was your courage and your professionalism that did it.
Lots of people in a small area will panic me because it sends me back to being outside that compound, being surrounded by people who were bigger than me.
يعني هو يموت بس مو هسه يموت قريب.
Everything that American troops have done in Iraq, all the fighting, all the dying, the bleeding, and the building, and the training, and the partnering, all of it has led to this moment of success.